open this box and try to look for the report inside.
Inside the money.
Yeah. So you want to? So yeah. Yeah. So what are you finding here?
Richard! All right, man, Richard! Richard, you got it!
Oh, and yeah, we found the report, the research. See, amidst all the money that has been laundered, amidst all the money, hold up some of the money. Amidst all the money that has been laundered, that has been stolen, we have people that are still doing work in trying to find the culprits and actually get the offenders to account for all the missing billions. So, this is the report. You will now get a copy. You know, this is our famous actor, our famous stepson, and various other personalities involved. So, you will all get a copy of the report now. We decided to do a little bit more in-depth research right after the DOJ in the US, the Department of Justice, when they filed a civil suit to claim back the stolen assets. The assets that were bought with stolen money in New York, in California, and it just, the list went on. It wasn't just about condos and luxury houses. It was about private jets. It was about yachts, hotels, and everything is based on our money. And it also went further into funding The Wolf on Wall Street. I'm sure many of us saw that. I mean, it was an Academy Award nominee for Best Picture, Best Actor, and so on. So we contributed a lot in terms of that. Now, globally, there is a lot of movement about claiming back stolen assets by anti-corruption groups, international financial institutions, all looking at how can you actually claim back the stolen money, and probably more realistic stolen property, buildings and so on and so forth. So it needs to come back to Malaysia because our institutions have closed off a lot of their doors on investigating something that is unresolved. It is not yet resolved. So the research, we want to launch it today. We're happy to launch it before media, before one or two diplomatic representatives that are here, and Malaysians from different spectrums, to actually talk to you about two parts. One was, the first part was written by Mr. P. Gunasekara. He is a business writer, business editor. So that one was very much part of the details of the DOJ filing. And since then, the Singapore courts, the Swiss AG has also taken action. The second part, the writer is not here today. She's Dato' Latifah American Chong, former Bank Negara Assistant Governor, and also done consultancy with the World Bank. Her part in the report, which you will get right after the launch, is actually to look at the regulations. Were there enough regulations? Were there enough standards internationally to actually stop financial flows of this nature? Or were there not enough? Or were there enough but they just couldn't stop someone like MO1 from doing whatever he liked? Now what really was the problem? So I think we actually want to deliberate on these things further and to look at what are next steps that we can take. And the next steps are really important because, as I said, it's far from resolved. And we also know that this year is probably going to be a general elections year. So it's all going to be heightened.
Mr. P. Gunasekara, maybe you could share your analysis on how international complicity has facilitated and empowered the one MDB corruption scandal.
The mispricing of the bonds. After the 5 billion ringgit bond, there was US dollar bonds. So if you have access to a bond calculator and it's easily available on the internet, what you do is you just put in the rates for the bond for the bonds, and then put in what the rate should be. The difference will give you how much somebody else made from the bonds. Yeah. So that is what we did. And bond mispricing alone accounted for around 6 billion ringgit. Details are in the report, like I said. And then there was another option deposit of something like 4 billion ringgit. So total these up and it came up to about 10 billion. asset overpayment and questionable purchases, these are the various purchases that they were supposed to have made with the loans that they raised. Apart from bank loans, by the way, the loans which were extinguished were the bank loans, and this was extinguished with money which was raised from the sale of energy assets to the Chinese. You know? So the bond borrowings are still outstanding, and this still is worth more than 30 billion as of now. I think it's about in the region of 32 to 33 billion. It varies depending on your exchange rate. So asset overpayment and questionable purchases amount to another 27 billion. And then overpayment to advisors was 2 billion. This is mainly Goldman Sachs. Yeah? The links were repeatedly to the same group of people, you know? So that was one of the things that we picked up. And then stolen, as I said, is more than US 3.5 billion. And then unaccounted for from the agent report is around 7 billion. So total losses perhaps around US 39 billion, 28 billion unaccounted for, 6 billion bond mispricing, 3 billion in overpayment of power assets, and overpayment of advisors was about 2 billion. So next, the report outlines how, for instance, the US 3.657 billion was stolen. The US Department of Justice report identifies 3 phases. The good stuff phase, which is US 1.03 billion between 2009 and 2011. And then you have the ABA BVI phase, US 1.367 billion. This was in 2012. The good stuff is, just to go back, is the one which involved the deal involving Petro-Saudi. I think you might remember that there was 7 billion ringgit worth of petro assets that they were supposed to get and so on. Details are in the report. So this involved US 1.03 billion, which was paid to Gusta, which was a company controlled by Jolo. The ABA BVI phase, this is ABA British Virgin Islands. So this was a company which was incorporated in the British Virgin Islands to mimic the name ABA, which was a UAE state enterprise. You know? So the money which was paid into this and then subsequently it disappeared. You know? So that was 1.367 billion. And then the Tenore phase was US 1.26 billion. So total of US 3.657 billion between 2009 and 2013. This is the good stuff phase. I think what we need to look at is here, good stuff, which is controlled by Jolo. Out of that 1.03 billion, US 360 million was purchase of US assets. 389 million went into this company which was set up by through BSI Bank in Singapore, and this was controlled by Jolo, used to acquire US assets among others. And then 24.5 billion went to Prince Turkey. This is the Saudi connection, out of which US 20 billion went to Najib Razak's accounting and bank. You know, so effectively, the Saudi connection actually only gave the PM's account US 20 billion, not US 681 billion. Oh, sorry, million. So the ABA BVI phase, these are effectively the people to which the money was distributed now. So this was US 1.367 billion to ABA BVI. And then from there, via Standard Chartered Bank Singapore, US 1.101 million to Blackstone. They used the name Blackstone to make people think that it is Blackstone, the hedge fund, you know, which does a lot of deals across the world. And then from these 473 million went to Kubaisi. US. These are people with ABA. These two people are under detention apparently in house arrest in UAE still. So Kubaisi and Bushani, 473 million here, 6.6. Najib Razak, 30 million. Jasmine Lu, 5 million. And then the big amount to Riza Aziz, who is the stepson, that is US 238 million. And then this is the Tenore phase, US 1.26 billion to Tenore Finance. This is again controlled by Jolo or his proxies. So this one is purely transfers between Granton and Tenore Finance to sort of like, hide the flows. And then this is the big one that came to Najib Razak's accounts and banks, and out of which US 620 million was eventually returned out there. Just the mispricing of the bonds. After the 5 billion ringgit bond, there was US dollar bonds. So if you have access to a bond calculator and it's easily available on the internet, what you do is you just put in the rates for the bond for the bonds, and then put in what the rate should be. The difference will give you how much somebody else made from the bonds. Yeah. So that is what we did. And bond mispricing alone accounted for around 6 billion ringgit. Details are in the report, like I said. And then there was another option deposit of something like 4 billion ringgit. So total these up and it came up to about 10 billion. Asset overpayment and questionable purchases. These are the various purchases that they were supposed to have made with the loans that they raised. Apart from bank loans, by the way, the loans which were extinguished were the bank loans, and this was extinguished with money which was raised from the sale of energy assets to the Chinese. So the bond borrowings are still outstanding, and this still is worth more than 30 billion as of now. I think it's about in the region of 32 to 33 billion. It varies depending on your exchange rate. So asset overpayment and questionable purchases amount to another 27 billion. And then overpayment to advisors was 2 billion. This is mainly Goldman Sachs. Yeah? The links were repeatedly to the same group of people. So that was one of the things that we picked up. And then stolen, as I said, is more than US 3.5 billion. And then unaccounted for from the agent report is around 7 billion. So total losses perhaps around US 39 billion, 28 billion unaccounted for, 6 billion bond mispricing, 3 billion in overpayment of power assets, and overpayment of advisors was about 2 billion. So next, the report outlines how, for instance, the US 3.657 billion was stolen. The US Department of Justice report identifies 3 phases. The good stuff phase, which is US 1.03 billion between 2009 and 2011. And then you have the ABA BVI phase, US 1.367 billion. This was in 2012. The good stuff is, just to go back, is the one which involved the deal involving Petro Saudi. I think you might remember that there was 7 billion ringgit worth of petro assets that they were supposed to get and so on. Details are in the report. So this involved US 1.03 billion, which was paid to Gusta, which was a company controlled by Jolo. The ABA BVI phase, this is ABA British Virgin Islands. So this was a company which was incorporated in the British Virgin Islands to mimic the name ABA, which was a UAE state enterprise. So the money which was paid into this and then subsequently it disappeared. So that was 1.367 billion. And then the Tenore phase was US 1.26 billion. So total of US 3.657 billion between 2009 and 2013. This is the good stuff phase. I think what we need to look at is here, good stuff, which is controlled by Jolo. Out of that 1.03 billion, US 360 million was purchase of US assets. 389 million went into this company which was set up by through BSN Bank in Singapore, and this was controlled by Jolo, used to acquire US assets among others. And then 24.5 billion went to Prince Turkey. This is the Saudi connection, out of which US 20 billion went to Najib Razak's account in bank. So effectively, the Saudi connection actually only gave the PM's account US 20 billion. not US 681 billion. Million. So the ABA BBI phase, these are effectively the people to which the money was distributed now. So this was US 1.367 billion to ABA BBI, and then from there via Standard Chartered Bank Singapore US 1.101 million to Blackstone. They used the name Blackstone to make people think that it is Blackstone, the hedge fund, which does a lot of deals across the world. And then from these 473 million went to Kubaisi. US. These are people with ABA. These two people are under detention apparently in house arrest in UAE still. So Kubaisi and Hussaini, 473 million here, 6.6. Najib Razak, 30 million. Jasmine Lu, 5 million. And then the big amount to Riza Aziz, who is the stepson, that is US 238 million. And then this is the Tanore phase, US 1.26 billion to Tanore Finance. This is again controlled by Jolo or his proxies. So this one is purely transfers between Granton and Tanore Finance to sort of like hide the flows. And then this is the big one that came to Najib Razak's accounts and banks, and out of which US 620 million was eventually returned out there.
I think it's quite clear that the BNM has all the stringent regulations, but yet we still see that the perpetrators, those involved in this scandal, have flouted the stringent regulations. Maybe do you have, what's your opinion on this?
What I say is that Bank Negara would know all the transactions. Any transactions involving capital flows between Malaysia and outside the country would have to be reported to Bank Negara. And I believe Bank Negara has made, has informed, and also as mentioned, although Bank Negara has got very strong regulations on managing capital flows, they don't have the power to prosecute. It's stated very clearly in the report. Because they have to make their recommendation to the AG, and it is up to the AG to decide whether to prosecute or not to prosecute. This is the reason why we are now talking about separating the powers of the Attorney General. Today, the Attorney General is both the advisor to the government as well as the public prosecutor. We feel this is not a very satisfactory, or it is certainly not a satisfactory, not a very satisfactory way of doing things. The Attorney General Chamber should be its role should be on advisory function to the government. It should be the advisor to the government on legal matters. The public prosecutor should be independent, should be an independent office. Of course, this will require constitutional amendment. It's not easy, but other countries have done it. And in fact, in other countries, the public prosecutor is independent, especially in America. The President of America cannot tell the U.S. Attorney General what to do.
The question is, maybe you can share with us your insights on the big picture of the scandal. Okay, what next in terms of international punitive actions? We've seen actions have been taken in Singapore, for example, the prosecution and also conviction of the bankers that facilitated the scandal. And also what next? Because it's quite clear that this case is far from being resolved. Okay, Tony, over to you.
And what MDB standard operating procedure is basically to screw you 3 times every night. The first time is when they borrow money. Second time is when they invest the money. Third time is when they steal the money. When they borrow the money, they pay in terms of fees, commissions, and discounts. Second time when they invest, they buy overpriced investments. And third time when they screw you, they launder the money. How do they do that? I'll just use one example. Actually, this applies pretty much to every phase. But 15 minutes, one example to show you how it works. So, one of the bonds, I think the second phase of if you read the DOJ suit, that will be the second phase. I think it's elaborated in the report as well. They borrowed 3.5 billion. They borrowed 1.75 billion in May 2012, and they borrowed another 1.75 billion US dollars in October 2012. Why did they borrow this money? The reason specified in the prospectus, the bulk of it, is actually to acquire Tanjung in May, Genting Energy in October. Okay? So they borrowed 3.5 billion US dollars, and they spent 1.5 billion to acquire these two companies. Now, they were not acquired at 1.5 billion US dollars. They were acquired for more than that. Tanjung was acquired for 8.5 billion ringgit. Okay, but the reason, and Genting was 2.3 billion ringgit for a total of, we get to a quick maths, 2.3, 8.8, 11.8. So it's 10.8. So 10.8 billion ringgit is approximately, divided by 3, about 3.5 billion US dollars? No, less than that. 3, yes, about 3.5 billion US dollars. But only 1.5 billion was used in the acquisition because 1MDB also took loans from local banks. They borrowed from Maybank, they borrowed from RHB to cover up for the balance of about 2 billion ringgit. Okay, so only part of the proceeds from this overseas bond issue was used to acquire the power plants. Now what happens after that is that we all know, and I've always accused them of overpricing the acquisitions. So when they invested, they bought it at too high a price, allowing Ananda Krishnan and Genting to run away with massive profits. Now, just to give a bit of background, Tanjung, Ananda Krishnan privatized the company. Includes property, real estate, includes power, includes Malaysia, okay, and includes the Pan Malaysian pools as part of the group, private company. So when they privatized the company for 8.8 billion ringgit, he already sold the Pan Malaysian pools for 3 billion ringgit to a group of private investors. So he has already made 3 billion back. So the net balance of the company is, well, 8.8 minus 3 is 5.8. Okay? And then 1MDB came and buy the power plants alone for 8.5 billion. And Ananda Krishnan gets to keep all the property assets that's still in the company. Okay? But we've always wondered why buy so expensive. Genting, same thing. Genting, they bought it for 2.3 billion. Any Genting shareholders here? Well, surely got most blue chip company in Malaysia.
Gambling mah.
Okay. Well, if you are a Genting shareholder, congratulations.
Yeah.
Because in the Genting annual report 2012, okay, which is published on March 2013, you will see from the report, you see from the contents of the report, they reported that they sold Genting Energy for 2.3 billion, and they proudly announced, specified, they made extraordinary profits of 1.9 billion. They sold 2.3, they made 1.9. Because in the books, Genting Energy was only left with 400 million in value. Why? Because the contract expires in 3 years. Okay, but they bought for 2.3. Now you always wonder why they buy so expensive. Okay, in typical Malaysian terms, it's called kickbacks. Okay. What was discovered by Wall Street Journal was 31 million ringgit was transferred to Yayasan Rakyat Satu Malaysia. But that's only what was discovered. What then I think Guna discovered when he went through all the, I think my memory serves me right, he went through all the reports of all the Genting companies and discovered that 190 million from plantations, from all the different arms of Genting, contributed a total of 190 million of CSR funds to unknown, unspecified entities. No, we don't know who they went to. And that would have included the 31 million which was done there. And the number is just nice. They made 1.9 billion profits, 10% of it, 190 million, went to some CSR obligations. And I checked, who is Yayasan Rakyat Satu Malaysia? You would have thought that it's a government-run charity. So you do an SSN search, you can do it yourself, it's still the same today. I checked it not too long ago. I rechecked it not too long ago. Okay? And it is actually a private company. Who owns the private company?
How can they call it the Yaya?
Foundation. Private foundation.
To get domestic minister of domestic affairs to approve it.
Is it very difficult? There are only two directors of the company, Najib and the late Dato Sri Adlina, who was part of the helicopter that crashed with JJ a while back, who was formerly Najib's confidential private secretary. Okay, so essentially kickbacks, and the money was used for elections. That's why during all the by-elections during that period, you see a lot of One Malaysia vans, free food, free lucky draw, everything. Money don't come from where? That's where the money comes from. Okay, but of course this is only a tiny portion of it. No, they still made a lot of money. And how do we know that 1MDB really overpaid for the acquisitions? We know that they overpaid for the acquisitions when they are forced to sell the power companies, not just Tanjong and Genting, they have one more, Jima, and they have contracts given by governments. So technically, if you add Tanjong, add Genting, add Jima, and add all the contracts given by the government, the value should be more than what they paid for, which is a total of, they paid a total of 12.1 billion, okay, for all the companies, and then they got additional contracts. So by right, if it is right price, the value should be more. But despite international open tender, okay, they said open tender, they could only sell it ultimately to China General Nuclear for 9.8 billion, making a loss of about 2.3 billion ringgit. Okay, so they lost money within 2 years, despite having been given new contracts, all the concessions here extended for another 10 years, they still lost money, showing that they overpaid for reasons that, as I mentioned just now. What other kickbacks are there? I don't know. Okay. Now, the second part of the funds, as you know, they said this fund was guaranteed by IPIC, so we need to give collateral. Yeah. So the collateral that was given was about 40%, just under 40%, 1.367 billion, and it was given to perpetually IPIC's subsidiary called ABA. Except now we know that this ABA was a different, the ABA which they paid to was a different ABA from IPIC's subsidiary. It's a bogus company set up in the British Virgin Islands with the same name. Okay, so they actually gave 1.367 billion to ABA, and we know that the money has been lost because the company is now folded, and the money went to, if I don't remember wrongly, 461 million to Auf Weishi, ABA officer. So they colluded with the ABA officer. The other ABA officer, Muhammad Husseini Badawi, he got 66 million. And then we have got Riza Aziz, Najib's stepson, he got 232 million US dollars. And of course, not forgetting Najib himself, who got 30 million US dollars in his personal bank account. But if you knock off all the sums that I mentioned just now, there's still a lot of balance left. Where did they go? They went to this guy.
The latest Arab in town.
Yeah. Who bought a lot of condominiums, hotels, paintings, which are being seized in the United States. So this is where the second part went. So I talked about how they invest overpriced, how they launder the balance of the money and stealing it, and then there is the fees, commissions and charges. Okay, 302 million paid to Goldman Sachs. Now, question is this a reasonable sum? 302 million, 8.6%. I'll focus on this part, because this part has been talked to death. Now, what fees have Goldman Sachs collected from us? May 2012, 1.75 billion, they collected 192 million US dollars, or approximately 11% of the borrowings. October 12, 1.75 billion, they collected 110 million, or approximately 6.3% of the borrowings. And in March 2013, there was another $3 billion issue, and they collected 282 million, or 9.4% in fees. Okay, for total commissions, fees, and expenses of 584.5 million, or 9% of the total worth of the issue. For those who are in the banking sector, you would know that 9% is an astronomical sum to be collected for a bond issue. And this term, certain commissions, fees, and expenses, is not my term. It is a term specified in each of these prospectuses. Okay, I asked when reporters ask government, what is this? They say just fees, nothing else, no commissions. Okay, but I asked the government in parliament, government say, oh no, we don't pay so much to government, actually part of it is discounts. But I checked the prospectus, there's no discount. So I cannot reconcile, and when I asked to reconcile, minister obviously ignored me. Okay, so let me give you an example for those who are not in the banking sector, how much fees are actually paid normally for these bond issues. Okay, GLCs, we have Tenaga National, they raised 350 million, small issue. So usually the bigger the issue, the lower the fees. For simple reason, the documentation is the same amount of work. Doesn't matter how much you raise. Okay, 350 million, 2%. We paid 9% average. Okay, we paid 2%. Syarikat this Penerbangan Malaysia Berhad, the company used to buy back all the Malaysian Airlines planes. Okay, they raised $1 billion US, 0.5% in fees, half. We look at other governments, since our Malaysian 1MDB is essentially a sovereign company, sovereign fund. Okay, other governments, Mexico, I don't compare US and all those high credit rating countries. No, I don't compare Singapore. I just compare Mexico. Okay, they raised 3.9 billion. How much did they pay? 0.2%. Another country, Uruguay, they raised 2 billion. How much? 0.1% in fees. Okay, how much did we pay? 9%. This is not 10 times, this is 90 times more than what Uruguay paid in terms of fees. Okay, let's compare other government sectors. Maybe government premium, they charge more than every other person. Okay, let's look at other government sector issues. The best one to look at is Equisa. For those who don't know, Equisa is not some international company. It is a Sarawak government company. Okay, so it's Sarawak government. It's the only state in Malaysia that, actually no, two states, Sabah and Sarawak, allowed to raise money on their own. Johor, Penang, whoever, if we want to raise money, cannot. We must get MOF permission. But they can raise money on their own. So Equisa raised money on, how much was their fees from Goldman Sachs? 1.3%. And this was, if I don't recall wrongly, approximately 800 million US dollars. 1.3% only. We paid 9%, as in 1MDB paid. I'm not 1MDB. But Malaysians paid 9%. Okay? Apple Inc., of course, big company, 0.3%. And then the Mexican deal was also arranged by Goldman Sachs. They paid 0.2%. So it's clear cut. The amount of fees we paid, 9%, is excessive by every standard. The reason given in the parliament by the ministers was, and 1MDB was, number one, there was discounts. Number two, it was high risk. What risk is there? These are essentially government-backed bonds. No, it's the next best to government bonds itself. No, they were secured. They were secured by the government, whether directly or indirectly. And the 3 billion bond was actually secured with a letter of support, which in effect was a guarantee by the government. So the question now is, with this framework, the next question to ask and discover in future is, how did Jolo play a role? Was he involved in this 9% of fees? Okay. Now, let me give you a plausible scenario how he could have profited from this. And this is where I think the reason why government's officers has been banned and sacked and reprimanded, even by government himself. Okay, plausible scenario. Goldman Sachs underwrites 6.5 billion bonds for 584.5 million in fees. Of course, a lot of money. They don't need to keep all the money. So to secure the deal, they agreed with Jolo. He will sell, Goldman sells 6.5 billion bonds at a discount, say 6.1 billion. These are all hypothetical figures, just to illustrate. 6.1 billion to Jolo, whether his associates or proxies. It is called Jolo and Company. Okay? So GS still collect net fees of 184.5 million or 2.8%, which is much higher than what they normally collect, as I showed just now. Okay, in fees. So very profitable already. But they sold at a discount, so Jolo and Company gets to buy at a 6.1% discount. What do they do after they buy with a 6.1% discount? Because these bonds are actually good bonds. They are not junk bonds. They are not from some kucing kurak company. It is actually backed by governments. Okay? They sell the bonds to genuine investors. Investors want it. I can tell you, during that time when the bonds were issued, I had local fund managers coming to me, asking, how come we were not given an opportunity to participate in such a good bond? It was very attractively priced. The interest rate for the first bond, 2012, was 5.9%. The interest for the second bond was 4.4%. And the interest for the third bond was also about high force, about 5%. So they are very well-priced bonds, secured by the government. All local institutions would want it. Okay? But they didn't have a chance to participate. It was all privately placed by Goldman. Okay? So Jolo then sells to genuine investors in the secondary market. I resell the bond. I bought it at 6.1 billion. I can now sell it at 6.4 billion. I sell 6.5 billion of bonds at 6.4 billion. So the buyers still get a discount. They still get a discount of 1.5% on government guaranteed bonds with attractive yield. But Jolo gets to pocket straight away 300 million in profits by just arranging this bond exercise. Now, another way that he could have profit even better, without even having to come up with a cent of money. This one is a bit tedious in the sense that they actually have to fork out 6.1 billion first, or find ways to fork out 6.1 billion, then we sell it in the secondary market. The easier way to do it is Jolo just goes to these genuine investors. You want or not? You want, you give me kickback 300 million. Then you get it at a special price discount. Okay, so there's a variation to how that scenario could have worked. Different investors could have had different discount, different mechanism of getting their hands on the bonds which were placed, because it's a very large issue at 6.5 billion US dollars. But essentially, some mechanism behind the scenes was used for Jolo to profit at that transactions. So we have seen how we have been screwed by the money being laundered. We have seen how we have been screwed by the money being used to buy overpriced assets. But I'm trying to show you also, even at the stage when they borrow the money, they are also screwing us. Okay, by overpaying the fees and then making quick money from the transactions. Don't look at this 300 million, so small 300 million. 300 million times 4 is already 1.2 billion ringgit. That's almost the budget of the entire Selangor State government for a year. Okay, so that's what I wanted to cover. The rest of it I can cover if there are questions later, but I think we all know recently how much was stolen. The total amount stolen is about 5.6 billion US dollars. Stolen means what? Stolen means taken outright. Okay, it doesn't include, for example, all the business losses, or they buy the companies at too high a price and stuff like that. Just outright take out from company and put it into someone else's pocket. So that's stolen. And how much are Malaysians' liabilities? The other day, as you may have read in the news, my colleague Bakri, constituency of Bakri, Muar, asked he asked the Prime Minister, please state the debts of 1MDB. So the Prime Minister came and stated that 1MDB has paid off 3.8 billion of debt, and it now has no more bank loans and short-term debts. That was the answer. Nothing else. He didn't say anything else about any other debt. So the impression everyone got was, wow, settle everything already. But in reality, what he didn't tell you is all these things are still outstanding. So the NST, if you read yesterday's NST, 1MDB, debt-free. But that's how 1MDB and the Prime Minister is answering questions today. You ask A, they tell you B. Pretending that A got no problem anymore. And if you are not careful, you are not informed, then you would think that, wow, really, sort really. But essentially, all these outstanding are still due for a total of approximately 40 billion. Okay? And this is after the government has taken over some of the transactions.
Terence Gomez. So maybe Professor Terence Gomez can share with us how the state structure allows the commission of this blatant corruption. Yes.
This is the structure of the state as it stands today. At the top is the Prime Minister and the Cabinet, and below here we have the Ministry of Finance, and here are the 7 what we call GLICs, government-linked investment companies. I'm only focusing on the government-linked companies because the government defined them as government-linked companies. These government-linked companies are MOF Inc., EPF, KWAP, the pension fund for government employees, Tabung Haji, always in the news, LTAT, the Armed Forces Fund, and here we have Khazanah and PNB. And below here is 1MDB, all controlled ultimately by Minister of Finance Incorporated. Those at the top here are what Tan Sri Sharif said are statutory bodies. Statutory bodies mean they are not companies. They are controlled by law. Those which are below PNB, 1MDB, Khazanah, they are companies, they come under the Companies Act. So this is the structure. The structure is very important because you can see the volume of power in the office of the Minister of Finance. And as you know, the Minister of Finance is unfortunately also the Prime Minister. A great anomaly. A great anomaly. The Minister of Finance cannot be Prime Minister. Now here, just these 7 companies, just these 7 GLICs, I'm showing you here the ownership and control patterns of these 7 companies in terms of the publicly listed companies they control in the top 100. I'm not even looking at the 900 other publicly listed companies. I'm just showing you the top 100. And if you look at the extent of control over the top 100 companies, this is phenomenal. Now you're getting a picture of why the Prime Minister will not release the position of Minister of Finance. Because look at the volume of companies that he has through MOF Inc. over the corporate sector. I can tell you now, we are going on to the next stage of the project where we are looking at the rest of the publicly listed companies to see how it works. We're also looking at the state-owned companies because that's how the way it operates at that level is very different. How do they control it? These are the control mechanisms. The business group structure I just showed you, those are all business groups, and these publicly listed companies are themselves business groups controlling a whole slew of companies. The companies that I showed you just now only captures a small segment of the companies under the control of MOF Inc. through these publicly listed companies. And these publicly listed companies in the top 100, there are 35 of them, we are talking about 6,000 odd companies. If you look at the whole range of companies, we are talking about 80,000, 90,000 companies under the control, ultimately, of the Minister of Finance. The second issue, or the second control mechanism is legislation. I'll show you some aspects of that. Control of the financial sector. I'll say some things on the financial sector, building on what Tan Sri Sharif just said. Directorships and policies. Don't worry, I'm not going to read all this. This is just to show you the law. The law is there to protect us. The law is to govern these companies because they're statutory bodies. If you read the law, the first thing that hits you is the volume of power in the hands of the people in cabinet. The extensive power in the hands of the Minister of Finance. The extensive power in the hands of Minister of Defence, who controls LTAT. The extensive power of the hands of Minister of Finance and the Minister in charge of religious affairs for Tabung Haji. I didn't show you Tabung Haji. But if you go through it, you'll begin to realize that they have a lot of decision-making powers. That decision-making powers will allow them to dictate how investments are done among these companies. The financial sector. I wanted to put up this segment on the financial sector because Tan Sri Sharif said earlier, in 1997, we had the Asian financial crisis, and that led to a consolidation exercise. There's a story behind that consolidation exercise. Mahathir made an argument in 1997 that there are too many banks and financial institutions in Malaysia, 57 of them, for a country of just about 20 million at that time population. That was too much. So he proposed a bank consolidation exercise. And from that bank consolidation exercise, they created what was known as 6 anchor banks. Minister of Finance at the time was Dime Zainuddin. A feud then emerged between Dime Zainuddin and other owners of the banks, including Mahathir's son Mozart and Tong Koi Ong. Tong Koi Ong owned a bank called Filio Allied Bank. It was merged with Malayan banking. The basic premise behind this was that Dime was getting control of a significant segment of the corporate sector, of the banking sector. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Of the banking sector. So from that 6, a feud just spilled over between Mahathir's son Mozani and Dime, and it led to a reconstitution of the anchor banks from 6 to 10. Mozani was then asked to leave the corporate sector. His companies were bailed out. And Dime left politics. I wrote an article on this. The title of the article was Why Mahathir Axed Dime. It was published in the Pies and Economic Review, July 2001.
Alliance Bank still owned by it.
I'll come to that. Wait for your later, John. You can ask all the questions you want later. Now, where was I before I was so rudely interrupted? That issue was held up, but eventually Mahathir let it through. When he was asked about it, he didn't deny what was said there, that there was a feud between Mahathir and Dime. The point about the consolidation exercise is, it led to a point where all our banks then came, most of our banks then came under the control of the state, the government, or well-connected people. That was in 1999. Today, look at the state of play. If you look at the ownership and control patterns of the banks, you will find Affin Bank, LTAT, Alliance Bank, now it was actually linked to Dime, now under foreign control. This is an important point. Foreigners now taking control of some of our major assets. It was alluded to by Tony. M-Bank, Asman Hashim, again, foreign shareholders from Australia. CIB, Kazana, Hong Leong, okay, quick. Malayan Banking, BNB, RHB, EPF, Bank Islam, LGH. The control of the banking sector today, when you look at it, a significant segment of the banking sector is now under the control of the state, or well-connected people. There are 2 banks, of course, Hong Leong and Public Bank. Public Bank is doing very well, it's not one of the top banks. But the point is being made to you all now, the volume of control that the government has over the banking sector. Do you know the implications of that if you have a leader who is not accountable? And let me tell you, at one point there was an attempt by people linked to 1MDB to buy control of RHB. The deal fell through and EPF was brought in to take it over. RHB at the time was the 3rd largest bank of the country. What would have happened if RHB had fallen under 1MDB? And RHB at the time, let me remind you, was owned by none other than Thai from Sarawak. His company then relinquished ownership of RHB to EPF. I don't think EPF was really interested, but they took it over. Now there's a lot of talk about merging RHB with other institutions. Let me come back to 1MDB. Since we are talking about 1MDB, where do we go from here? I must say, I was a bit concerned. I am concerned that very little has been done about the actors in Malaysia. We have spoken at length about the actors all over the world who have been privy to this nonsense that we have seen in government. Now, who are the advisory board people? Of course, Najib sits there at the top of the advisory board, and they are right. Guna and Tony are right. 1MDB, the way it is governed is very different from Kazana. Very different. It's far more complex. The way the governance structure of the GLCs is far more complex than what we see. But here, the governance structure is so fluid. Najib at the top, and I highlighted another name, Noor Muhammad Yaakob, in the advisory board. Who is Noor Muhammad Yaakob? Noor Muhammad Yaakob used to work for Bank Negara. He was involved in that speculation of currency which led to the Forex scandal, and he left the bank. In 1997, a defining moment again, Mahathir is sitting and thinking, now what do I do with this currency scandal, currency crisis? How do I deal with it? And he remembered Noor Muhammad Yaakob, who was involved in currency speculation, brought him back, made him advisor to government, became the de facto Prime Minister, Finance Minister, and later under Abdullah he became Minister, second finance minister, and then later became minister in the EPU. A rather distinguished career in the law. He also became a senator first and then later an MP in Penang. He ran in the 2008 election, one of only 2 MPs from UMNO who won the election, who won the seats in 2008. The other was, of course, Abdullah. He was dropped by Najib before the 2013 election. But Nur Muhammad Yaakob, a very prominent figure. I brought up Nur Muhammad Yaakob because let's look at who are the actual directors of 1MDB. At the top we have Lordin Wok Kamarudin. For those of you who don't know who Lordin Kamarudin is, he is the long-standing MD of LTAT, a very close associate of Najib when he was defense minister. He was very famous for being involved in the Scorpion scandal. You remember the Scorpion scandal? The Scorpion submarine scandal? You know that submarine that refused to sink, which they bought? He's the one. Paramita, he was a director of Paramita with Raza Patinda. Their ties go back a long way. There was a deal involving 1MDB, involving the acquisition of Petro Saudi. The MD at the time, Shahrul, didn't inform the board, and so there was a dispute. And Bakay, the rather, I would say a decent man, Bakay Saleh, left the board. He was replaced by Lordin Kamarudin as chairman. Another director who left, which is very, very interesting, is a chap called Azlan Zainal. Another well-regarded man in the corporate sector. He was also in 1MDB, he left. His replacement was Ong Gem Huat. You know who's Ong Gem Huat? Ong Gem Huat is the partner of Jolo's father, Larry Low. So when Azlan resigned, his replacement was a man directly linked to Jolo. Larry Low's son, Jolo. Larry Low is the father of Jolo. You see the point I'm trying to make here? And the other people who are here are Ismi. Ismail is a director, a long-standing director of LTH. Again, those ties with Najib for a long time. When the scandal eventually broke, there was not much news on this, and today they've all been exonerated out of the scene. They've all been removed. They should be held accountable for what has happened because they were the directors. Now some of them will claim that they knew nothing about what is happening because Shahrul was doing everything. And Shahrul was probably as MD reporting directly to Najib. That's what they may claim. But he was still director. Bakay resigned. Azlan Zainal resigned. Shahrul now, as you know, in the PEC report has become the fall guy. And yet nothing has happened to Shahrul too. So here there are still things that they have not been sorted out. I want to come back now to other issues which were raised. Ownership and control of the media sector. I already talked about the banking sector. Let's talk about media. Why is this not in the news? Thank God we have Malaysia Kini. And Geraldine, I see, is taking notes. And I'm glad to see that Malaysian Insider is coming back in a new form. Yeah. Malaysian Insider did a lot of good work, I must say. And I'm glad also, I must say I'm very sorry to hear that Guinea Biz, the work that Gunnar was doing was phenomenal, drawing attention to these issues. But let's look at the media. The media sector is interesting because at the top, you don't know whether you can see, MOF Inc. with the different GLICs controlling a company called Gabungan Kasturi, a private company which nobody has heard of. This private company has, along with EPF, has majority stake in a company called Media Premier. Media Premier was once called MRCB, was part of MRCB. MRCB was a company which was controlled by Real Mahal Sendirian Berhad, which was an UMNO-owned company. During the crisis, after 1997, when Mahathir removed all Anwar's boys, he took control of Real Mahal and MRCB, and it was Nur Muhammad Yaakob who went to Mahathir and told Mahathir, look, this company controls the media, you better revamp this company. And he brought in 2 young men, Sharil Rizwan and Abdul Rahman Ahmad, turnaround experts, young men at that time, both from Oxford and Cambridge trained. very intelligent, well-trained in business, but still young, but groomed by Norma Mayako. They broke up MRCB into two companies, Media Premium and MRCB. MRCB is still around. Central Station, you go there, you'll see MRCB. They turned them around. They turned around Media Premium. Media Premium took control of just the media companies. And here you see the media companies, TV3, NST, TV7, TVA. It's all here. All controlled by Sharil and Abdul Rahman. Sharil is the CEO now of EPF. Who did he replace? Aslan Zainal. He replaced Aslan Zainal as director of SMD of EPF. Who is Abdul Rahman Ahmad? Recently appointed MD of PNB. Isn't this getting scary? Do you see the point? Who is Sharil and Abdul Rahman? Look at their history. Groomed by Norma Mayako. They were brought into EPF, PNP, they were directors of RHB. You look at their history, it's a history of long involvement in the GLCs. All those companies which I showed you in the second slide, they used to be part of those companies, or still are, as directors or MD or some capacity or the other. So the implications of this, my conclusions, the implications of this are serious. This is the state of play as it stands now. That is why today, even though the opposition has persistently argued correctly that the Prime Minister cannot be Minister of Finance, and Najib has been told repeatedly to stand down, at every cabinet reshuffle, he refuses to do so. There's too much to lose. There's too much control, ownership and control here over the corporate sector for him to give up to someone who he cannot trust. Who is there for him to trust? That would be the other question. And remember this, Mahathir, before he took over as Prime Minister, first as Finance Minister, first it was Diane, fought with Diane. Then it was Anwar, fought with Anwar. Then finally he said, enough is enough, I'm going to be Finance Minister. Abdullah should have made the changes, and Abdullah didn't. And Najib should have also done the same, but didn't. And now we know what? In terms of control, the most important thing they control is the banking sector. They control the banking sector. Directorships. I've already shown you some examples of directorships. And directorships in terms of control of key GLICs, PNB, LTH, LTAT, as I told you, loading is still there. ISMI has now stood down at LTH, but he's been replaced by an UMNO member. What, Aziz UMNO, chairman. It's not good. You can't let these savings-based institutions be controlled by these politicians. The dominant sectors, I mentioned banking, I mentioned media, let me mention construction. If Najib will be remembered for anything, he'll be remembered as Minister for Infrastructure Development. Because look at the voluminous number of construction projects under this Prime Minister. This was the Prime Minister when he came to office said, Prime Minister, when he came to office, he said, I believe in small government. I don't believe in big government. I'm going to privatize everything. Why should government be in business when we should let the market run everything? And then suddenly we see a takeover of major companies. SP Satir, UEM Sunrise, IJM, Gamuda. These are all major construction companies in the top 100, all controlled by the GLCs. Why is this important? When we talk about public policies, in 2013, after Najib lost badly in that election, he came up with a new policy. It was called the Bumiputra Economic Empowerment Policy, the BEE policy. His version of affirmative action. This was the same Prime Minister, when he came to power, he said, no more affirmative action. It was headlines in the Star, no more. Because it is not helping investments, it's not helping draw in investments, especially from domestic investors who were fed up with this policy. I'm not saying affirmative action is bad. I'm saying affirmative action and how you use it is important. For education, it has been quite successful. But in business, it has been disastrous. And anyway, he came in and he said no more. And then he introduced the BEE. And most recently after that, he said, I am going to use the GLCs and the GLICs to award contracts to Bumiputra contractors. He even said it recently for the ERL, 43 odd, I can't remember the amount. big amount who's going to go only to Bumiputra contractors. Now, why am I saying this? We are seeing here the practice of political patronage through the abuse of the GLCs and GLICs to muster support at the grassroots base too. Through the abuse of public policies, which is supposed to be helping poor people, or helping to build up small and medium-scale Bumiputra-owned enterprises. This is what you're seeing today. If you know the policies and you know how they operate, you can understand how things are being played out by Najib. And finally, state. As I said, this was the Prime Minister who said no more or reduce state intervention. Now you can see that the state is a big player. If you look at the plans after the government transformation plan, after the new economic model, there's a lot of talk about privatization. But after that you will see they're very silent on privatization. They're very silent about divesting investments. I'm not a proponent of privatization, let me tell you. But all I'm saying is, why is he now suddenly so quiet about policies like privatization? It is not in his interest to do so. And now, as you know, the big issue is about state-state, GLCs with SOEs. Who are the SOEs? State-owned enterprises from China. China coming in a big way and taking up some of our major contracts. That is the state of play today.
Mr. Boleh.
Let me stop here because I have presented to you how things are. Let's now have a Q&A about where we're going to go from here. Thank you.
Have we just really badly messed up this Bumiputra policy and use it as a framework for politicians to now legally steal without being accountable? Because now, if I condemn the Bumiputra policy, I look like I'm anti-Malay. Okay, and I won't even touch the 355 because there's another separate topic I have a great interest in. But just talk about the Bumiputra policy. You say you're against Donipua, you're against NEP. Actually, even NEP had a context. When Tun Razak articulated it and the first National Consultative Council, there was a fixed context. We've taken it out of that context, and today everything is done in the name of Malay Bumiputra policy, and we cheat, we steal, and we lie. And nobody wants to call them out. Sir, I just need your affirmation that I'm not wrong.
My question is, I mean, you've all presented us with some very, profound information, some of which we knew, some of which perhaps we sort of knew, but you've pieced it together to give us an overall perspective. So, moving forward, what do we do? What can be done? We know what ought to be done, but in the political reality of today, what can be done and by whom? Thank you.
I agree that big government is something which can lead to a lot of problems of cronyism, nepotism. And therefore, I think the faster we get away from heavy government intervention in the economy, the better it will be for the country. Now, while this may take some time to change, I think there are a lot of things that can be done in the meantime. If we can bring all these corporations to a high level of accountability. And this is where I have always believed that, for example, on the question of 1MDB, if this was the US or the UK, they would have held an open parliamentary inquiry to find out what was the cause, who was responsible. The parliamentary inquiry is not for the purpose of trying to convict the person, because parliamentary committees cannot convict anybody. They can hear views, they can bring out the information, and they will submit a report, and it's up to the public to make up its own mind. And it's up to the Attorney General to decide whether the information obtained from the parliamentary inquiry gives him enough evidence to file a suit against the person responsible. I think this is what is sadly lacking in the country. I'm I've always been saying this, that if we have a strong system of checks and balance, we don't have to be worried who's going to be the next Prime Minister. But if we don't have a strong balance, checks and balance, any other person would do the same thing. So this is why I think we should all advocate for transparency and accountability, not only in the institutions of government, which is Parliament, the Judiciary, AG, Police and MACC, but also media freedom. I think media freedom is very important because, as we can see in MDB, without the media taking an active role, very little would have come up to the surface.
Actually, a lot of things we can do, but none of them will produce instant results. They actually require persistence and perseverance, and hoping that everyone's little bit of action will actually result in an outcome that is favorable for us. Is there a magic formula that will bring down Najib tomorrow? No. But I think we need to look at the ultimate objectives. Number one, find resolution to punish the criminals behind the 1MDB scandal. And for me, the bigger goal is to bring down a corrupt government. So everything we do to resolve this scandal revolves around that. This report is part of the, I don't want to belittle the effort, but one of the little efforts among many which should be carried out to ensure that the issue doesn't fade into oblivion. I think that's at this point in time what the Najib administration wants the people of Malaysia to do. It was sort of leaked out of the bag by a frustrated second finance minister who told me to give it a rest. Because the moment the people of Malaysia gives it a rest, boring, still the same story. Same slide, same story, same people, same accusations over and over again. People get tired, people forget about it. That's when Najib gets to sleep at night, and that's when Najib gets to escape scot-free from the crimes that he has committed. And that's the reason why we cannot give it a rest, and that's the reason why every time I have to scratch for new things to talk about, new angles, new jigsaw, even though overall it's the same subject topic. I don't blame people for getting tired, but that's exactly what the administration wants you to do. Tony Paul talking about the same thing again. Ignore him, not important anymore, swept under the carpet, debts has been repaid. That's when they run away scot-free. So one of the key work we have to do is to keep the issue in the headlines. The problem, I also understand the media have difficulty. I can't say the same thing every day and expect the media to print my statements every day or anybody else's statements. So we keep having to be creative, and I think the people have the responsibility to keep the issue in the limelight, keep it going. Various angles, same angles, repeat the same story. One thing I learned from my boss one day is that you need to talk about it until you feel like throwing up yourself. Otherwise the message doesn't get to enough people. You may think that they have heard of it, but actually maybe in this room 50% have heard, 25% half heard, 25% is new. So there will always be new people to reach out to, even if you keep repeating the same story. And we are not repeating it enough. Yes, the urban crowd is more aware, but the rural crowd may not be as aware or may not see as much importance to the issue. And it's important for us to, of course, the next step for political parties, for NGOs, to reach out to the kampungs. How do I translate this stuff that no kampung reader will read into something that kampung people can understand? It's not easy. It's easier said than done. It's definitely a lot easier said than done. But every effort should be made to make sure that this goes out, whether in a one-page leaflet, cartoons by Zuna, or any other mechanism, videos, charts in Bahasa Malaysia, in Chinese, because the folks in Chinese villages only read Chinese, so that they can actually reach it. And then the other front is to keep all the fires burning around the world. we have to make representations perhaps to the Swiss government, representations to the Singapore government, representations to the United States government, make claims for the funds on behalf of the people of Malaysia. Since the government of Malaysia doesn't want to claim it, the people of Malaysia should claim those monies that have been frozen. Do you know what happens to the 300 million or so frozen in Switzerland, or the 100+ million frozen in Singapore? It goes to the Singapore government and the Swiss government. Because why? No one's claiming the money. The government of Malaysia is not claiming the money. So I think that the legal guys, for example, should form a representation to find a way to make ourselves having sufficient locals to make claims for money. Even if the money doesn't come back to Malaysia, if it is set up in a trust for the benefit of young Malaysians, maybe scholarships for them going overseas to top universities to study, that's something that is useful.
So is that being done?
There is talk about it, not enough concrete actions yet. To be fair, you know, the people here, you see, it's the same people doing 8 different things. We do need more people, expertise, and support. There are many big shot corporate lawyers who are too busy making money and not spending enough time doing some of the work that they are well qualified to do in this area. And I think these are areas that we require specialist expertise. It's not even your normal, sorry, with no prejudice against normal lawyers, but these are not areas where your normal lawyers can contribute. These are actually your top lawyers in countries who can do it. But they are not in this area because perhaps their rice bowl will be affected or what, I don't know. But these are areas where perhaps some of your friends are, you need to convince them, get in touch with Cynthia and form an elite group. I don't like the word elite, but this task requires professionals, highly skilled professionals, to have a decent chance of success at our booths. On our part, we will keep biting doggedly at Najib's foot. We filed suits against Najib. I did one. It was not easy, let me tell you, trying to gather a team of volunteer lawyers. I mean, know everything, but getting the lawyers to understand everything is another matter altogether. So it took 2-3 months just to put together the document, which was about 110 pages long, of course, translated English and Malay, with all the details in there, for it to have a negligible chance of success in the courts. For the simple reason that we all know that I'm suing the Prime Minister, the chances of success is actually fairly deep, even if your case is actually well argued. But we wanted to put in a well-argued case to have the maximum chance of success in the court. So, other Malaysians, there are many things you can think of, little things. The most important thing is to keep the issue alive in your community. 1MDB isn't the only problem in the country, as what Prof said just now. It is not. But it is the representation of what has happened to Malaysia. It's the ugliest representation. And there are many other scandals. People come to me with scandals, 100 million, 200 million. Not that I don't want to take it up, but with 1MDB, tens of millions up there. Anything else will be seen as too small by the population. So to capture the imagination of people, 1MDB is used as the focal point. Not because it's the only problem in Malaysia, but because it actually epitomizes what is happening to Malaysia today. So I hope that helps. Andrew does a lot, but everyone else can actually contribute.
As Najib is Prime Minister, given the situation as it is now, he will not implement these changes. So what are the changes that can be done very quickly? First of all, as I said repeatedly in my talk, the Finance Minister should stand down. The Prime Minister cannot be the Finance Minister. There should be a clear delinking between those two posts. The second point, which can be done quite easily, is I showed you all the structure of the ownership and control of the GLCs and the GLICs. That has to change. They cannot be accountable to the Minister of Finance. They have to be accountable to a separate body. And here I want to bring to attention the work being done by G25 on the issue of public governance. They had a very good conference recently looking at the state of play as far as public governance is concerned. And they're coming up with a good report on how we can reform public governance. This is very important because, as you can see, the volume of ownership, the volume of companies under the control of the state is huge. And if you don't reform public governance well, then we're going to have a big problem. So one of the recommendations which they will make, which I think is very important, is to look at parliamentary select committees. And these institutions should be responsible or accountable to the parliamentary select committees. And these parliamentary select committees should be led by the opposition, not by a sitting member of cabinet or from the ruling party. That's how it is in most other countries where there's a check and balance, as Councillor Sharif said, where there's a check and balance system in play. This is how it should be. And these reforms are not difficult to do. The third reform which can be done, yes, the Act allows it, as Councillor Sharif said, it's there. The third reform is this: the directorships and the management of the GLCs and GLICs. They can be led by independent, competent executives, and they should be left alone to do what they have to do. The interesting thing, and I didn't go into it because I didn't have time, the interesting thing about the GLCs, when we look at the top 100, they have been in the top 10 or top 20 for a long time. After the revamp of the corporate sector after 1997, when the GLCs went in and took over many of the assets held by well-connected people because they were all in crisis, the GLCs emerged as major companies in the corporate sector. If you look at the figures in 2001, if you look at the top 10 companies, 7, 8 of them were GLCs. 16 years on, if you look at the top 10 companies, 7 or 8 of the top 10 companies are still GLCs. That's why I told you earlier in the talk, it's not so black and white where they're just plundering these companies. They have to ensure that these companies perform well. There is a competent management. Councillor Sharif raised this point. They chose competent people to lead. I told you, Sharil and Abdul Rahman, they're not political lackeys. They've been trained abroad, they're well educated, they're turnaround experts, they know how to run these companies. But when required by the state to suit the interests of the state, for example, Tony brought up the point of CSR. CSR is a new catchword through which they channel funds out of the GLCs into the political scene. They will do it too. So the reforms can be done, and it can be done very quickly, as I say, if there's political will. The time has come for us to put real political pressure on the Prime Minister to bring about these reforms quickly, because you cannot let this state of play continue. And I'll end by how I started. Will the Prime Minister do it? No. That's our big problem.
I think what the official media can do is pretty limited, because I know, as Terence pointed out in his slide, most of the mainstream media is owned by the government, either by UMNO or ANC, and therefore what they can do becomes very limited. And even if there are journalists out there who want to write in the media, other people are not going to allow those things to come out. Now, I would like to go back to Andrew's original question about what can be done. I think it is very clear, I think, that this government led by Najib has to change for major reform to take place. Now, for me, the most worrisome thing, and I think Terence has expressed this in previous conferences that I've attended, is that we have moved to a state of kleptocracy. Basically, you have people who are borrowing money. They borrow money from overseas, billions of dollars, and they are putting the till into this borrowed money and just taking it out. This is a relatively new phenomenon for this country, and this kind of grand theft has never taken place before in the country. Okay, so this has never taken place before in the country. So what do you do about it? There has to be a change in a government which actually continues to approve such matters and not take any measures against it. So there are only two ways in which this can take place, as far as I can see. One is for the change to come from within UMNO itself, for them to realize that if they were to say keep Najib as the leader and go with him to the next general elections, then there's a pretty good chance that they might lose that election. So perhaps UMNO might decide that we will do some kind of a deal with Najib, and then ask him to step down and somebody new will take over. So then there will be the promise of, these things are all in the past, it's not going to happen in the future. And perhaps some amount of change will have to be done as a result of that. The other thing is the opposition winning the elections, which at the moment doesn't seem to be very likely because there's a lot of division within opposition. There are other things which has been happening, and the people who can change the equation, which is I think the rural heartlands, both here in Peninsular Malaysia as well in Sabah and Sarawak, nobody has really managed to reach out to them. So despite say the opposition having a chance to win the elections from 2008, and the fact that they actually have the popular vote over 50%, they have not made very much of progress in terms of reaching out to the rural heartland and getting to the votes. Getting them to understand these issues in an understandable manner. Okay, I can try and simplify this as far as I can in English, but somebody has got to do it in Malay, in Chinese, as Tony Cross said, and then get it out to all these people so that they understand. So you have to make them understand. I think people have to make them that theft of grand proportions has taken place. So that has got to be the message. The government has been stealing your money. State that message over and over again, and perhaps that message will sink into the people. Everywhere you have your rally, say that. And then the other thing is, if everybody must exercise their vote, for change to take place, and express their opinion through whatever channel that they can express this. So it may not happen in these elections, but I mean, as Malaysians, we just have to keep on chipping at the block, and then eventually perhaps that the entire edifice will fall, and something else will emerge from that.
I think we need to look at ourselves. All the speakers spoke about political will. There's very little or almost none for change. So who can alter that? It's us. So if you look at South Korea, you don't even have to look at the West. Look at South Korea, how they ousted their president. Change is part of the democratic system. So if any of you attended the Bersih rally, despite all the threats and everything, do you think that one rally is actually going to bring any change? No. So that thing about not giving it a rest is really in our hands. And I'm saying that that's what we need to do. We need to keep talking about it. We need to keep passing the message. And for me, of course, we need to get to the rural heartland. But if you look at South Korea, the kind of consistent demonstrations and people power that were shown, every Saturday, the crowd was getting bigger and bigger. And look at what happened. It's because they were so adamant about getting rid of their president. Her crime, if you look at her corruption crime, it's not even half as serious as Najib's corruption crime. If you want to compare now, of course corruption is corruption. But the point is, the people of South Korea will not tolerate this in their system anymore. And they won't tolerate this in their system. So that is the point. It's really left up to us that democratic process and the threat that the government keeps giving to us about overthrowing the government is total bullshit. Because if you're corrupt, you're corrupt. The people have to say you don't have a place in the system. That's it. But I think part of our problem is that we're so cowed by fear, and there's so much intimidation, so much harassment everywhere from all sectors. So as much as I'm inspired by Professor Terrence's very, very inspiring presentation, my next campaign I'm thinking let's do a separation between Finance Minister and Prime Minister. But I also know that's not really the root of the problem. The root of the problem is something much, much bigger. He's actually holding on to both poles so that he can do whatever he wants. But as much as we need to take on this campaign, it's really about systemic change and everything. And it can only come from us. I'm just saying it can only come from us. Most of you may be YB Tony Pua's constituents already that are already voting for him. But this is what we need to do. He can't give it a rest, so which means we can't give it a rest, which means Malaysians need to start talking about it. Sometimes when I go for international meetings, sorry, all the microphones have run out of power. But sometimes when I go for international meetings, people ask me this question, I really don't know how to answer. What's wrong with the Malaysian people? Why aren't you all doing anything about it? Why aren't you standing up? Why aren't you saying anything? Because the subject of 1MDB alone has been the subject of intrigue in so many different jurisdictions. No one has stolen money, I think, in this kind of fashion. But the point is, maybe are we so immune to corruption? I don't think so. It's just that we're asking Andrew's question, what can we do? What's the next thing that we can do? And I think we should be at least talking about it, if not doing more. So I just want to propose one thing. We are actually talking about trying to find a way to get Malaysians to follow the kleptocrats in our country, which means follow the money, follow how rich they are, follow unexplained wealth. You might have politicians living in your neighborhood, for example, and when they open the gate of their grand electric gate, you might see a Lamborghini or a civil servant driving a Porsche and all that. And I think we need to actually start becoming citizen journalists. We need to start posting pictures of unexplained wealth. We need to look at how people in power, the political leadership, with so much salary, can they actually earn a huge luxury house? These are things that anybody can do. We can all do, and we should be posting it up and getting the momentum going there. Okay, the point is clear. I think we just need to start getting more active about monitoring and scrutinizing our political leadership. We can't take a passive stance. And if this is what urban citizens can do best, we should actually be much more active in doing that.
That note, I think there are a lot of things that we can do. It's just that we cannot lose hope, because hope is the only thing that we have that they can't take away from us. So thank you for coming. I would like to invite everyone to express our thanks to our speakers for being here today. Thank you so much for your support, for your insights. I think it is very important for us to continue advocating for this cause to see a better Malaysia. Thank you everyone for coming. Thanks.